All right. So, this is the first interview of this series, and I am so excited to have Ariel. Do you say Ariel or like Ariel?
No, Ariel.
Okay,
Just like a Disney movie.
perfect. That's what I
Yeah.
was assuming. But I'm so
Yeah.
excited to have Ariel from the Blog Stop here to talk about, starting a design business and finding your style and yeah, just chat about the craziness that is running a business.
Yes, I know. No, I'm so excited to be here. Yeah, it's so fun to get to just talk to other designers because it can be really isolating a lot of times. And you
Mm-hmm.
kind of start to feel like you might be crazy. So it's just nice. This is so fun. I love it. Thanks for having me, Abby.
Yes. Okay, so let's start with sort of an icebreaker question. So what font or typeface are you really loving right now?
This is such a hard question.
I know.
Okay, so the typeface that I've been most obsessed with is it's called Voyage and it's by Violaine and Jeremy.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yes.
Like the most expensive font I've ever bought. I was like, I have to have it.
Yeah.
So that one for sure. But then I've also been really loving Poppins. It's a Google font. I used it
Mm-hmm.
on a client project like a few months ago, and I had
Mm-hmm.
never used it before. But I don't know. My like go-to sans serif font is usually Montserrat.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm always trying to find like other ones to branch out. So I've really been liking that one, and that one's
Mm-hmm.
free.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I love everything that yeah, VJ
Yeah.
type.
I don't
Yeah.
know.
I love
Yeah. I know.
everything they create. It's like it's so unique and it sucks because I feel like most clients those fonts probably are going to be like really extreme. Like, you know what I
Yes.
mean? It's like
Yeah.
only certain clients you can like justify it using that type of font, but
Totally.
they're gorgeous and amazing.
I know. I know. I love them so much. They're so creative.
Mhm.
Yeah. Totally. So that's where I'm at.
Awesome. So yeah, so let's start talking about how you started your business, the Blog Stop, and I know you talk about being self-taught as a designer. So how did you like first get into design? How did you figure out it's what you wanted to do with your life? And when did you decide to make it your business? Because I'm sure, I mean, I fell into entrepreneurship. It was not my plan. So I'm really interested to see how all that happened for you.
Yeah, totally. So I think like for most of my life, I never even considered having any kind of creative career. Like I don't know, it like never even crossed my mind that I was even a creative person. So like I went the traditional route. I got a degree in communication, mostly because I was like had no idea what I wanted to do, and that's the most general degree you can get. Um, and I worked as actually an admissions counselor for a really long time for higher education. So like
Mm-hmm.
recruiting more students to come to the school.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I was working at a school down in Los Angeles, and I attended a like Instagram workshop because I kind of like just wanted to explore creativity, I guess. I'd always like loved blogs. I had a blog throughout all of college and like all of my early adult years, and I was just like always obsessed with the blog design process. Like I would just spend hours figuring out how to like custom code like blogger themes. And like I don't know, I loved having a blog, but I think the
Mm-hmm.
real reason I loved it was because I got to design it. Not that I like really identified that though. So I was kind of exploring like LA's creative scene. I ended up meeting a woman at a workshop who had a like small branding and website design boutique agency in LA, and she was looking for someone to help her with like administrative work, like 10 hours a week. So I like applied for the job. She offered it to me, and I was working. So I was working for her at the same time as I was still an admissions counselor, and just like absorbing everything. And she was like the creative director, and then she had a graphic designer on the team too who would design everything for the clients.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it would be like live design. So we'd actually get on a call with the client and design everything live.
Oh,
So
wow.
yeah, it was intense. The graphic designer would be designing live and the client would be giving feedback live. And it was just this whole process, which I didn't like love, but it gave me the opportunity to watch someone
Mm-hmm.
design. And I just like absorbed everything I could. Like she never taught me anything, but just in watching her and observing her, I learned a lot. And my boss would kind of just throw small things at me like, hey, can you recreate this graphic in Photoshop? And I would just like Google how to do it and figure it out as I went. And then eventually I started forcing myself to use Illustrator instead of Photoshop just to like start to learn a new platform. And then after about a year, I moved into like the head designer position
Mm-hmm.
at her company. And so I was the one designing all the client projects and building out all the websites. And it was just like a matter of teaching myself small things as I went and like having a project that I had no idea how to do and then figuring out how to do it. So I worked for her for about 3 years and then her company actually went under. And so I lost my job. And I had kind of like thought it would be fun to run my own business the whole time I was working for her, but I hadn't really like pursued anything.
Mm-hmm.
And my husband and I had wanted to take this year-long trip around the world, and we've been saving for a few years to be able to do that. And it didn't make sense for me to like go off on my own at that point because our priority was to save money. So I
Mm-hmm.
ended up getting an admin job at an accounting firm for about 6 months. And while I had that job, I started like seeking out my own clients. And then like 6 months later, quit the job, we traveled, and that whole time I was working, building a business. And then by the time we came home a year later, I was able to like self-sustain us. He didn't actually get a job for about the first 6 months when we got back. So I was like the sole provider, and I was able to maintain like consistent work and like build a full-time business where I was making more doing that than just like going out and looking for a job. And I don't know, it's kind of like grown from there. But
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I think I've probably been doing it full-time now for about 3 years. I want to
Mm-hmm.
say maybe 2.5. But yeah, now I'm here and it's been amazing. It's been crazy. Like growth is so exponential. I feel like people don't realize that. Like the first year could feel really slow, but then the second year you could like double or triple in
Mm-hmm.
size, and it just like it's so exponential. So now like I feel like I'm still such a newbie, but I feel like growth just happens so fast and it's crazy. So yeah, that's kind of a long version of how
Mm-hmm.
I got started.
Yeah, no, that's amazing because I feel like one, it's really just awesome here because like I went to school for design and I feel like a lot of people just kind of get nervous about being self-taught if they're like if they think they want to do design and they're like, oh, do I need to go to school for it or can I
Yeah,
just teach myself? And it's such like a, I don't know, it's such like a scary thing, but
totally.
I know in my experience, even as someone who went to school for it, I felt like I didn't even learn any. I mean, of course I learned stuff in school, but I felt
Yeah,
like the stuff that I really needed to learn was after school and just like
doing it.
working. Yeah, and like learning as I go. I mean, I feel like I learned way more during the first few months of freelancing than I learned in school because school is just like learning the basics of design. And
Yeah,
I also feel like some people are just naturally talented at design too, so it's like it's way easier for you to just like learn as you go and pick things up being
yeah,
self-taught. Um,
totally. Yeah, no, totally. And I think like I didn't realize, but this year I've gotten some heat for being self-taught. Like I've been approached by other designers who went to school, and I've gotten like, I don't know, some like weird heat about being
really?
self-taught and kind of like how dare I position myself as a professional or like I don't know. And so I kind of like have this year felt a little bit like, wait, am I okay doing this? But like I wish I would have gone to school for design. I mean, like I envy you and like all the people who knew they wanted to do that and I just didn't. And but I think ultimately, like, if you're willing to work really hard
Mm-hmm.
and you're committed, like, you can teach yourself, and it might take longer and it might be more work and it might be a lot more hours of like Googling and sorting through bad information. But I think if you're willing to put in the time and the work, you can do it. And I like strongly believe that you get to decide like what your life looks like. And
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it's really just about like grit and hard work. And I think talent is some of it, but I wasn't good when I first started. Like the first things I designed were
Nobody is.
terrible. Yeah, like it's not like I woke up one day and I was this like professional designer. Like it
Yeah.
takes time, but if you're committed to being the best and getting better, you can. I think you can totally do that
Mm-hmm.
in a self-taught way. Yeah. So
That's
I don't know,
so
but yeah,
weird that you would get anybody
I
would say
know.
anything about that, because I feel like if you're in the freelancer or like entrepreneurship world, there are so many people who are like the example of success in that world, and like a lot of them just picked it up randomly, like whatever they're doing, if they're a photographer or like business coaches or whoever. I feel like so many people who are the big people in this industry, a lot of them are self-taught, and like obviously you can become an expert. I don't know, that's so weird.
Yeah, I know. It super threw me off. And I think like maybe they'd had bad experiences like cleaning up after
Mm-hmm.
amateurs, and like I'm
Mm-hmm.
sure that happens. But like you can also decide to be the best. You know,
Yeah.
like when I work with clients, I I I mean, I do all I can to be the most professional, you know, and to
Mm-hmm.
like figure out how to do it the way a professional designer would.
Yeah.
I don't know. It was just like weird to assume that anyone who doesn't have a degree is automatically like less good or
Mm-hmm.
less qualified. Because yeah, I talk to so many designers or aspiring designers who don't have a degree and want to do it, and I think like you absolutely can. I mean, I'm proof of that. And like totally, I think if you're in school, get a degree in it. That's awesome. I wish I would have, but if you miss the opportunity or you can't, like that opportunity just isn't available to you, I don't think that should stop someone.
Yeah. It's so
So
weird. I don't feel like it really has anything to do with if you went to school or not. It's just like, are you talented or
yeah, yeah,
not? It's
yeah.
not the schooling helps, but it doesn't make you a good designer necessarily. I feel like being a good designer is, like you said, working at it a lot, being really passionate about it, and like, yeah, it's more than what they teach you in
Yeah,
school, and especially when it comes to working with clients.
yeah,
And I talk about this a lot too, is that there's so much that goes into being not just a good designer, but a good design business owner that they never teach you in school. So that's where like school really doesn't matter in that in that area,
totally.
because they're not teaching you that stuff anyways. That's stuff that you teach yourself, or you learn from taking courses from other people.
Totally. And like, I'm sure you don't feel like you needed to go to business school to now run a super successful business, you know? Um, so yeah, totally. No, I totally agree. I mean, it makes me feel good that you said that because you did go to school. So
Yeah. um Yeah, that's just so weird. I just can't get over that anybody would say that.
I know.
Um, yeah, so whenever you first started, were there any like mindset blocks that you had to overcome, like in the early stages? Like, I know for me, I was really concerned about being young, and like I thought I wasn't experienced enough. And so that affected me in just like how I presented myself and my pricing and stuff like that. So did you struggle with anything about
Yeah,
that?
totally. Totally. I mean, I think yeah, absolutely. Like the experience thing. Obviously, I taught myself how to design, and I just like hobbled my way through running a business as I go too. So, absolutely. And I think like just figuring out how to present myself in a way that didn't come across with clients. I don't know. I think I don't know if you like the Enneagram, but I'm a 3 in the Enneagram, like the achiever. Like, I'm motivated by like being my absolute best and like achieving and being successful and all those things. And so I think I've always been super driven in that way of like, I don't care, I'm gonna figure it out, or like, this is what I want, I'm gonna make it happen kind of thing. But totally with pricing, I mean, I felt like for sure I had to slowly build up to like a price that I thought was unattainable for myself. Like, I think I would totally felt like I had to go through the years of, I started at $200 and then maybe next year I can charge $500. And it was like this slow build. And I think like even until like a year ago, I still kind of struggled with that. And like understanding what value-based pricing is and why I am worth what I charge. And yeah, so many designers struggle with that because we feel like our prices should be a reflection of our experience. And I don't believe that anymore, but that was definitely a hurdle to get over for sure.
Yeah. And it's kind of like a society thing too, in that if you were doing any other job, like if you're applying for a regular job, you put on your resume how many years of experience you have, and most jobs, the pricing is set up with, however many years you've been working, then you get a pay raise. And so that I had the same mindset too. I was like, well, obviously I did lots of like searching around with like other designers to see what they were charging. And, I would see, oh, they're charging this much. They've been working for this many years. So I can't charge that number until I like get to that point. That was totally my mindset too, which, of course, in the beginning, like you said, my work was way different in the beginning. And of course, I didn't think that I should be charging a ton of money for what I was doing, because I was still learning and like still figuring out what my style was going to be. But I definitely should have charged more than what I did, because I was just like, I'm starting from zero. So that means I automatically have to charge less than anyone else that I see out there.
Totally. Yeah, no, totally. And that's what I tell like my students and designers all the time, is that no client is ever going to ask you how old you are. They're never going to ask you how many years you've been doing this. Like, not once have I ever gotten those questions. And so as long as you can deliver what you say you can deliver, like, that's really in the end all that matters. So yeah, I know, but it's weird. It's for sure like a mental hurdle to get over, especially when you're first starting out.
Yeah, it definitely took me a while before I realized that exact thing, that like, oh wait, nobody has asked me once how many years of experience I have. The only thing that people would ask me occasionally was like if they were in a specific industry and they wanted to see something in my portfolio that I had worked with someone in their industry before and I hadn't. And then they would ask about it, and then they would go with someone else who had. That was like the only like issue that I ran into. But it was never someone just asking me, how many years have you been working?
Exactly.
Nobody was asking me that. And doing, the problems with your portfolio, that's something that you can fix. And like, so yeah, it was just, it took me a few years to like figure out that I was just holding myself back by thinking that I couldn't charge a certain amount.
Yeah, totally. I know, it's crazy. But yeah, I've gotten that question too. Like, have you worked with specific industries or other people in the industry? And I mean, what can you say? It's like no designer has ever worked with every single industry under the sun. I feel like no matter how experienced you are, I don't know, that question, what would you say to that question, So yeah. And I think, I don't know how you feel, but like, I feel like a lot, like the word niche floats around a lot. And like, do you design for a specific industry? I think a lot of designers feel like they have to design for a specific industry. Like, I'm a designer for photographers, or I'm a designer for the healthcare industry. And I don't know, I've always felt like that was super restricting. And I feel like people connect with my work, and that's like niche enough. Like the people that are drawn to my work and connecting with my work, like that's who I want to work with. And I don't care what industry they're in. But yeah, I don't know, like, how do you feel about niching? I'm always interested to hear.
Yeah. I've gone against niching too, because I've just been like, I want to work with lots of different types of people. And I'm kind of the same, where I feel like now, after I've been doing this for, a few years, and I've really developed my style, and now it feels super consistent. Now I feel like my style is my niche, I guess, because that's what people come to me for. They recognize my style, or like that's the reason why they're going with me. And so yeah, now, like, just this year I started thinking about niching a little bit more, not necessarily because I felt like I had to, but I was just like, I really want to work with some clients that I haven't been able to work with yet, or like maybe I've gotten a couple but I haven't. I don't know, I think I'm not like fully niching, but I've just been more selective about like what I show on
Yeah.
Instagram and stuff, so that I'm just doing like, I don't know, subtly just trying to target those people. But yeah,
Yeah.
it's tough, because obviously niching can work really well, and I've seen it work really well with so many people. But yeah, I don't know. I get kind of, like you said, I feel kind of like boxed in if I would say I'm only working with these types of clients from now on.
Totally. Yeah, no, I agree. And I love what you said about like subtly kind of attracting the kind of client you want. And to me, I don't know, that doesn't even feel like niching, because maybe you want to work with a different type of client a year from now. And
Yeah.
that doesn't mean the projects you did like now are irrelevant to, I don't know, to like your overall work and your overall aesthetic. But I love that. I mean, I feel like you were one of the first people too that I saw doing personal projects, and like specific personal projects, because I I felt the same way. Like I felt like I was falling into this trap of, I was getting client work, but it was nothing I loved. Like I was never excited about the project, and I really like almost was embarrassed to have it in my portfolio. Not because the client didn't like it. I mean, it was like exactly what the client wanted, but our aesthetics just weren't aligned. And so in trying to figure out how to like get out of that cycle, because you share your work and then you get more clients that like that vibe, and then it's like this cycle. And so yeah, I reached this point where I was like, I'm just not going to show any of this, and instead I'm just going to like create. And I feel like you were one of the first people that I saw doing that too. And like, I mean, from the beginning you've always inspired me in that area, because it's along the same lines of like, you create the life that you want, and like you kind of create the like the vibe of your brand, of your business. You create the like clients that you're attracting, and the audience that's connecting with you. Like you can decide all those things. So yeah, I mean, I know personal projects have been huge for you, and they've been big for me too. Like I feel like that was really the turning point in working with people that I didn't really connect with and love, to now getting to work with like actual dream clients. So yeah.
Yeah. And it's funny because tying it back to like going to design school, the whole reason I first started doing personal projects was because right whenever I started freelancing, it was like 3 weeks after I graduated from school. And the only work that I had to show in my business portfolio was my schoolwork. And I had an internship too, so I could show that. But it was like, right as I started my business, there was this design conference that was going on. So I bought a ticket, and they had like a portfolio review. And I'd done a portfolio review for my senior class in school. But I just wanted to do another one because I was like, oh, maybe they'll say something different. I felt like they were just kind of telling everyone that their stuff was good. So I was like, maybe this person will.
For next year,
Yeah. Yeah. But anyways, it was with this really awesome designer who like worked with magazines and stuff in the UK. And so I thought he was going to give me like an honest opinion. And
Yeah.
he looked at my stuff and he was like, well, this stuff is good, but is this the stuff you want to keep doing? Like, is this the type of client you want to work with? And I was like, oh, no,
Yeah.
definitely not. And so that's whenever it was like a light bulb went off in my head. I was like, oh my gosh, this is the stuff that I was like building my business site, you know? And of course I just had my schoolwork up
Yeah.
there in my portfolio. And I was like, oh my gosh, this stuff, it wasn't that I didn't think it was good or I wasn't proud of it, but I was like, this has nothing to do with the types of clients I would want to work with. So I scrapped everything. And so that's where it's like going to school was helpful for me, but all of my projects, some of them maybe I would have kept or something, but a lot of my projects, I felt like they were very guided by my professors in a
Yeah.
way. So it's like, and of course in school, I was just trying out any style that I could think of, you know? So it was kind of all over the place, but yeah, it didn't feel like it was really mine. Like I felt like I would need to totally redo them to actually put them in my portfolio. So that's why I started doing personal projects to begin with, was because I didn't feel like I could show any of my schoolwork because I knew I wasn't going to get clients I liked with it. and
Totally.
so and so
Yeah.
yeah, so I just scrapped everything and just I didn't have any clients lined up anyway, so I had all the time in the world and I just made up my own projects and filled my portfolio with that. And yeah, now 4 years later, I'm still doing that. I feel like
Yeah.
there have been times where my portfolio on my website is like half personal projects just because I'm always thinking, okay, what's the next type of client that I want to get so that I can feel really excited about running this business and not feel like I'm just taking stuff on, you know, to
Yes.
pay bills or something.
Yes.
Yeah.
Totally. No, totally. I love that. And like, I feel like I had this huge revelation too of, because I feel like, especially when you're starting out, you think that your website needs to just essentially be like a collection of all your work, and
Mm-hmm.
that you kind of, as a designer, have to be really unbranded, you know, like
Mm-hmm.
just blank slate, because all your client projects look different and you don't want to clash with any of your work, and that like that's what you need to be showcasing. And I had this like light bulb moment of like, I'm not even going to show my client work. Like, I'm going to just I'm going to brand myself. You know, I'm going to like
Mm-hmm.
create a website and an aesthetic and a vibe that is just like me and what I love. And I can be like the most creative with it. And I can do whatever I want and I can develop it. And I think like ultimately, for me at least, like that's what draws people into me. Like
Mm-hmm.
I think I had a client, I asked her a couple months ago, like, why did you choose to work with me? And she said, I saw your brand and I saw the vibe you created for yourself and I knew you could do it for me. And like her
Mm-hmm.
style was polar opposite from mine, but she just like wanted what I had built for myself for her
Mm-hmm.
kind of thing. And it wasn't even about like that she'd seen all my work and loved all my work. It was just like, wow, she did that for her. Okay, I know she could do it for me then, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Because I think, and I feel like all my client projects are super different. Like I hope that there's a, like you look at them and you kind of see a overall vibe, but
Mm-hmm.
I feel like they're all super different because all my clients are super different. And I don't know, like the reason why they were drawn to me, I think is because I like was able to develop my own personal brand. And you do an amazing job of that too. But I think, yeah, I just had this light bulb moment of like, oh, what if I put my client work like behind the scenes? Like, yes, I'll have a page for it on my website, but what if what I'm putting up front for people to see is like a brand that I've developed for myself, and it's like everything I ever wanted it to be, you know,
Mm-hmm.
like it's really like a personal project, but I just applied it to myself and my own
Yeah.
brand, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. And that's where clients will recognize good work, whether it
Yeah,
was for a client or if it's just for yourself,
yeah, totally,
100%. Um,
totally.
and that's also the funny thing. And I feel like I've had this conversation with lots of designers about trying to figure out for their own branding which route to take, because we follow lots of like agencies, big agencies, and the way that they present their brands, typically it's like super minimal, so that their work is just kind of really what speaks for itself, I guess, and like their own branding is just like feels very I guess it just feels
Right.
agency like, but it's not personal. And of course it's like an agency, so there's multiple
Yeah.
people, but it is kind of funny how um, we feel like we have to go one way or the other. Either we have to have like a super personal brand where we're like showing our face and everything is like very specific to us and like shows our own personality, or it has to be very like monotone, I just do design type of thing. And I feel like a lot of that, it depends on the type of clients that you want to work with. And I feel like you're probably the same in that, like you said, this client reached out to you because she recognized that you did all that stuff for yourself and you care about, having a personality with your brand. And I've had the same thing too, where some clients who've come to me, they've said, they've said, they liked my style and they'd seen some past work that I did, but they were like, also just the way that you like show up and,
Yeah.
show your face in your business and the way that you talk about your process openly and stuff. They were like, I felt like I knew you also. You weren't just like a business that I was outsourcing something to. Like you're a person that I would get to work with. And that helps build a little bit more trust, I guess.
No, I agree. I think like there's always those like mysterious designers who like never show their face, and
Yeah,
it's
you're
always,
like, what do you even look like?
yeah, exactly.
I can recognize all of your work, but I have no idea what your face looks like.
Yes. Yes. So I think I totally agree. Like from a client perspective, there's a lot of trust that's built in like showing
Mm-hmm.
up and being like, hi, I'm the girl behind the design, I'm the one you'll be working with. And I totally agree. Like they already come in feeling like they know you and they trust
Mm-hmm.
you and they know you'll take care of them. So I think that's for me too been like huge in building a business and getting clients consistently.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I definitely think it for us, because I'm mainly working with smaller businesses who
Yeah.
it is just one person
Yeah.
behind their brand too, and so that's why it works well to attract those types of people. I guess for agencies, if they're working with big companies, then it's also kind of the same thing. Like, whoever owns the big company is not the whole person, sometimes isn't the whole personality of the brand. So I get why it can work for them. But at our level and like the types of clients that we're working with, having you as the person
Yeah.
be a part of your brand, it doesn't have to be as, like, I know some people that I follow, like Jenna Kutcher, or, some people who are like really big, and it's like, now her face is the brand. It's
Totally.
just her. It doesn't have to be that extreme, but yeah, for me, showing my face some has definitely helped.
Yeah, agreed.
Okay, so what's something that you wish that you would have known before, or like when you first started the blog stop, and like were there any big mistakes that you made that you wish that you could have avoided, or just like places where you wish you had known more ahead of time?
That's a good question. I think like the biggest thing I wish I would have known, and I don't know if it's even possible, but I think I just wish I would have known what is possible.
Mm-hmm.
Um, like I think I would look at other designers, and feel like there's no way I can ever be them or like get to that level. And I think that was reflected in like my pricing and in my like self-confidence and in just like how I operated, how I talked about my business. And I don't know, like I wish more designers starting out could see what's possible, like just for their life. I mean, like, I didn't even think I could ever get to a place where I could work for myself full time. Like, you know, where I felt like, oh, this will always just be something I do on the side, and I'll always be trying to make it, kind of thing. And two, that like the industry feels really competitive and really oversaturated, and it's just really easy to feel lost, I think. And I think too, I wish I would have, the woman that I worked for wasn't like a great mentor, in the fact that like she would just always have me copy what other people did. She would be like, oh, can you just like recreate what, you know, this type thing. And I think that like was a weird mental thing for me, where I've worked really hard to like counteract that, I guess. And I think I wish I would have from the beginning just like not looked at other designers and not got caught up in what they were doing and who they were, and feeling like I had to be like them to be successful. I think like when I look at my work from my early years, it feels like a culmination of like 5 different designers who I admired and wanted to be like, and it was just like a less good version of all of them, you know? Like, I wish from the beginning I would have just been like, what do I, Ariel, want to create? Like, what do I find inspiring? What do I love? And just like created based on that, instead of looking to these people that I saw as successful and being like, well, I just need to do exactly what they did and I'll get there, kind of thing. But yeah, I don't know. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, no, for sure. And I feel like whenever, I don't know if you felt this way, but whenever I started, I was just felt kind of like nervous to talk to other designers about stuff. Like, I joined Facebook groups right away, but I was just, I don't know, I felt really nervous to like put myself out there and like ask for advice or just like be a part of conversations with other designers. And maybe it was that I thought, like you said, it's a competitive, saturated industry, and I thought that I thought people would be annoyed, like, oh, this newbie who like doesn't know anything is trying to like, I don't know, steal our strategies or something, like if I would ask for help. And it took me a while to like, I don't know, get comfortable with asking for advice on things. But that's where, like you said earlier, how it can be really isolating, because you do kind of feel like I have to be self-made. I have to do all this stuff on my own and figure everything out on my own. And of course, that's like a trap that you just put yourself in, because of course you're not going to, you can figure things out on your own, but it's going to take you so much time and like making tons of unnecessary mistakes. But, you know, once I started just asking people for like, how do you do this, or what do you say to a client when they say this to you or something, and like people are so willing to give advice and share stuff that they've figured out, or like share tricks that they've learned on how to do stuff. People are so willing to help, and I feel like it just takes people a little bit of time to figure that out. And of course, once they do, then things start to become much easier, and you realize that kind of helps you, like you said, realize what is actually possible. I do also think and I feel like it's getting a little bit different now, at least I've noticed some changes in like how open people are about things with business, like sharing stuff about money, or like, you know, times whenever they really messed up, and you know, like the messier things. I feel like people are a bit more vulnerable about stuff like that now, and of course that also helps. Like I'm in a Facebook group for uh, like a course that's for designers, and in there they talk about money a lot. Like people will share, oh, this is what I quoted for somebody, and maybe they booked or maybe they didn't. That's not necessarily the point, but just that people are sharing what they're trying to charge, and that they're scared to charge that much, but they're doing it anyways, and like sharing about it. And that, having that type of culture, I guess, and like being a part of that type of community of designers, that's where you kind of realize, oh man, either you're thinking, okay, people that I thought had everything figured out don't actually have everything figured out, and that makes me feel better that I don't either. Or
Yeah.
you realize, oh, that person, I would think that we're on the same level and they're charging that much. Like, that means I can charge that much too. It just kind of all together helps you realize that you're not alone, and also that you're capable of what everybody else is capable of too.
Yes. Yes, absolutely. And I think too, once you make those connections and you like find community like that, you start to feel more legit. You start to think it's
Mm-hmm.
exactly what you're saying, like, oh, these people are all doing what I'm doing. And I look at them as legit, so I must be legit too, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Because when it's just you and you're just like figuring out as you go and, you know, you're like making up contracts and client processes, it's easy to feel like, am I doing it right? You know,
Mm-hmm.
like, is this the way what I'm supposed to be doing? And then as soon as you see someone else doing it too, you're like, okay, cool. You know,
Yeah.
I know
Yeah.
what I'm doing. I know what I'm talking about. I am legit. Like, I have a business, you know, kind of thing. And yeah, absolutely. I think 100% like find other designers and find mentors. I think
Yeah.
having mentors is game changing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, just like you were saying, like people to ask, people to say like, well, have you been in this situation before? What did you do? How can I get to the next level or next step kind of thing? So yeah, no, totally. I
Mm-hmm.
love that. Yeah.
Yeah. I think of like one uh, example in particular where this was last year. Um, and I had a client who it was all my fault on like the management side, and that I just did not put my foot down with them about stuff. But like their project, it was a website and they just ended up taking forever to get their content done. And it should have been like a 2-month project max, and it ended up lasting like almost a year. And it was just like crazy. And in my mind, I was like telling myself, like, you're like 3 years into business and like you just had this happen. Like, how could you not see that this was going to happen? And why did you not handle it better? And I was just kind of telling myself that, like, man, I'm still making really bad business decisions, or like I'm not a good business owner because I let that happen. And then I had a mentor that I was working with, and I had like texted her about it, and she's been doing this for like 10 years. And she was like, oh yeah, I have a project right now that's been going on for over a year. And I'm like, okay, so it's not like I'm, made this horrible mistake, or like I'm a horrible business owner that this happened. But like, it doesn't matter how much experience you have. Like, everybody has, I don't know, crappy things happen, and you just kind of deal with it. But
Yeah,
yeah,
I
that
know.
was like a really, it didn't make the situation any better necessarily, but like at least I felt less guilty, and that it wasn't so much my fault, or that I wasn't any less of a business owner because it happened.
Oh, absolutely. And I think every situation like that, you can just learn, like all you can do is learn and say like, how can I avoid this next time? I just had a project too that was like, didn't feel right a lot of the time. It felt like, yeah. And it made me just like refine my process so that I know next time I want to approach a situation like that this way.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and yeah, like you're saying, everyone, no matter how experienced you are, is going to have clients like that because you can never predict how everyone is going to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Um,
You can
yeah,
get better at it, but like stuff still happens no
yeah,
matter what level you're at. And I also think it's important to like remember, and if you have a mentor, someone who you view as like they're the expert, and then you realize that they're still having stuff like that happen, that's where you kind of realize that you can be an expert
yeah,
and still have, I don't know, slip ups, or like make
totally.
mistakes, that it doesn't make you an expert. And that's where it was like, maybe that's what I was feeling. I was like, oh, I'm not the expert that people think that I am, because I still made this huge mistake. But it's like, no, I can still consider myself an expert. Like, that
Yeah,
didn't take away from, the quality of my work or anything. It was just a sucky thing that happened.
Yeah, totally. No, absolutely.
Yeah. And so, I mean, you talked about like hiring a mentor and how much that, has helped you. Is there anything else that you've done in your business that you feel like has just made a really huge impact or like made you really proud? Just something that you felt like really helped you grow and move forward?
I mean, we already talked about this, but for sure, personal projects, creating for myself, and creating from a place of like joy. I mean, I think it's
Mm-hmm.
easy to like feel like when we have a client, it feels like work and we're doing what the client wants and we don't have as much creative control or creative freedom. And so like, I think just creating for myself was huge in creating my best work because it was all totally coming from a place of like, I don't know, like the depths of my heart. You know? And so therefore, like, I just felt like the freedom to make it whatever I want it to be. And I think that's where there's so much magic in like who you are as a designer is when you just create for yourself. And like, hopefully that can be emulated in your client projects as you go. But like that was huge for me. And also, honestly, like raising my prices. I think jumping over the hurdle of like, I need to like work my way up to that to just being like, no, what I have to offer is really awesome. And I know it is because my clients have told me and I know I do good work. And like you said, like making that leap. I remember the first call I had where I was just like, I think I was charging like, I don't know, $5,000 for like my full website project. And I was just like, my mentor, she had just said, and I thought that I had an inquiry call. I thought she had a really low budget. I was actually going to quote her like lower than that because I wanted to work with her. And my mentor had told me like, why don't you just quote her what you think you're worth? Like $10,000. And I was like, she can't afford that. Like, and also what? No. And I got on the call with her and I did. I quoted her $10,000, which was like twice as much as I ever quoted anyone. And like, at the end of the call, she's like, oh yeah, I'm ready. I want to work. I'm ready to get started. And she booked and like, it was like mind blowing to me that someone would pay me that much, that like I could charge that much. And I think, yeah, you have this mental block of like, I need to slowly work up to that. And like, maybe I'll get there one day. But honestly, I didn't feel like I actually ever would probably. And then like one moment you're like, oh, why didn't I do that 2 years ago?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So that was big too.
Totally.
Yeah. I think that's like the fastest way to scale is to just raise your prices. I mean, yeah, it's crazy.
And it's such a scary thing. And like, I totally understand when people get super nervous about raising their prices, but it's like you can always lower them back. You don't have to stick with. If it doesn't work, then you can always lower it back, and it's not a big deal. That's kind of the beauty of being a business owner, is you get to decide what you want to charge, and you can change it as much as you want.
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally. Yeah. And that's why I tell people like, and I don't know how you feel about this, but I like decided to take my prices off my website because I sometimes quote clients differently for the exact same thing. And like sometimes it's, a project that I feel like is gonna like totally suck the energy out of me. And I'm gonna like quote that person maybe a little higher because I don't know, it's just gonna take a lot more of my time and energy. Whereas like maybe there's a client that is like even an acquaintance or I don't know, like I feel like it allows you so much freedom to be flexible in your pricing and like truly base your quote off of like the value you're bringing to them. And I don't know, I just think there's so much freedom in that. Exactly what you're saying, like you run the business, you totally get to decide what you charge, and it can even be different on a project by project basis.
Yeah. I've messed around with like having my prices on my website, not having them up there, and I keep going back and forth. Honestly, I can't even remember if they're on there right now or not. I'll have to check afterwards, because it's like I don't know, I've just changed it around. I don't think I do. I think I have like maybe in my frequently asked questions section, maybe I give like a giant range or
Yeah.
something, just to give like, if they're really concerned, to give like the lowest that I'll go. But yeah, it's funny because I used to be I used to always want to have my prices on my website. And I think part of it was because whenever I was starting out, I didn't know what to charge. And so I would look at other designers' websites, and I would always feel like really grateful if they had their prices on their website, so that then at least I could see and like have some idea of what was possible. But yeah, it was like, not last year, I think the year before that, whenever I first tried taking my prices off. And that was right after that was the first $10,000 project that I booked. And, you know, that was higher than what I would have charged, but it was like the only reason I knew to charge that much was because I didn't have my prices listed on my website. Instead, I asked what the budget was on like the contact form. And sometimes that can limit you too, even just asking for a budget. But the client told me that her budget was 10,000, and I was like, oh man, okay. And it was like, and it's always funny because I feel like the clients who I've worked with who have had the biggest budgets are not the people that I would expect to have this type of, you know, the people that I think, okay, you should have a huge budget, they don't want to spend anything, you know.
No, absolutely. It's the same. And I think like I just always try and remember, I have no idea. I should assume nothing when I go into an inquiry call. I should assume nothing about their budget. I should assume nothing about what they can afford, and I should be just charging like what I know I can do for them. Yeah, because I think we get so caught up in feeling like if we price our price too high, we'll lose business. And I'm in like a bunch of Facebook groups too, and I just saw a feed last night. Someone had asked like, hey, graphic designers, what are you struggling with? And there were like 30 comments, almost every single one was like getting people to understand the value of design. And I was thinking, like, I feel like I see where that's an issue, but I personally I feel like I've moved out of experiencing that. Like, a lot of people that come to me, they know, like, that good design is expensive, and they might not be able to afford me, but they always tell me, like, I know it's worth it, and I hope one day I can, kind of thing. And I was trying to think, like, what's the difference? And I don't know. I think like when you price yourself high, you position yourself differently. You like step out of the, like, I don't know, like the war of fighting for any and all client work. And you step into this like role as like, I'm an expert at what I do, and I will like radically change your business, and you can pay me to do that, or you cannot. And it's your, like, it's almost like detaching the emotional side of things. And that was something my mentor told me too, like, go into every sales call completely detached from your price and like from your desire to work with that person. Like, yes, be excited and all that, but like, it's kind of like, well, here's what I charge, take it or leave it. Like, if you can't pay that, then that's what I charge. You know?
Yeah. And it takes a lot of practice too, to get comfortable talking about pricing with people in that way, and like to present yourself confidently. I feel like that's also where people struggle a lot, because it's like, yeah, you might want to raise your prices, but that means that you have to like sell it to the client too, and you have to convince them, and it might not work the first couple of times. You know, it's going to take a little bit of practice before you can present yourself as that expert. But then once you do that, yeah, it just kind of flows. And like you said, not attaching yourself to it, not getting too worked up over if somebody doesn't say yes, because like, I think some of like the biggest quotes that I've put out, like the first project that I put out first like quote that I put out that was over 10,000, they didn't say yes. They went with a different designer, and it was so awkward because it was another designer that I knew, and then I like saw that designer doing their work, and then I was like, well, wait, what was she charging?
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
it
It's
was like I was beat up about it. I was like, oh,
yeah.
like did I do something wrong, or like
Yes.
what happened? Because the call like went so well, but you know, then a couple months down the road, I pitched that same price again, and they booked. So
Yeah.
it's just practice, and I don't know.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. And I think it's easy to feel like, oh, am I not worth that? Am I not worth what I quoted that person? And because I
Mm-hmm.
still feel that way, like exactly what you're saying. I'll quote them and then they'll either come back or like, there's always the client who makes the offhanded comment about like, this is so expensive or like, or oh, I'm paying so much for this kind of thing. And it just makes you feel like, wait, am I worth that? Or
Mm-hmm.
like, do they feel like I'm worth that? Should I be charging less? Like they said no. And yeah, I think you're absolutely right. Like it has nothing to do with you. It has nothing to do with like what you can do and the value you bring. It's just, you just don't know. You don't know the situation. You don't know anything. And
Mm-hmm.
that you shouldn't value yourself less just because someone else, for whatever reason that you don't know, did.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I feel like a lot of people, especially if it's like new business owners that you're working with, a lot of them just don't know what to
Yeah,
expect. And like
yeah,
that's not your fault, and that's not their fault even really. It's a lot of people, I get it that working with a designer, I mean some people who are like in my family don't understand what I do. So why would I expect this random person who's inquiring with me to understand the value? Um,
yeah,
so yeah,
totally.
it's not, it has nothing to do with you. They just don't know. They just don't understand the process. They don't understand what goes into it. And that's just where I feel like, because I had early on, especially, I got people that were like that. Um, and that's just where I've made a lot of the stuff that I share on Instagram and talk about is I try to be very active in trying to educate people and like
Yeah,
show my process and show that I'm not just, you know, whipping up a logo in
right.
an hour and like that's all that there
Yeah,
is to it, that this is like an intense process that I go through, and it takes a lot of time and effort, and
yeah.
yeah, to try, just to like show that, oh, this is something that is really valuable, and
Yes,
of course I'm not going to pay $200 for someone to do something like
right.
that for me.
Okay, wait, on that note, I'm going to sidetrack a little, but I
Mhm.
have to know, how do you feel about the designers who say like their process can be done in like 5 days or 2 weeks?
Mhm.
Like, because I think I struggled with that. Like, I saw those designers and I thought, oh, how attractive to a potential client. Like, oh,
Mhm.
you can get this, like your website up in 2 weeks. Um, and since then, I've just felt like my process can't be condensed to that. Like,
Mhm.
I mean, my process is, yeah, usually like 2 to 3 months, especially if we're building out like a custom website. And I just always wonder, like, how are they doing it? I don't know. Do you see those people? Do you have any thoughts? Did you have any thoughts as you were building your process?
Yeah. So I feel like it's just recently that I've started like looking into that type of stuff, cuz yeah, I'm like you. I would see people doing like website in a week and I'm like, no way. I could never do that. And I also, whenever I started doing websites, I was like super pro custom website. I did not want to work with templates. I was like, you have to go custom. That's the only way it's going to be like unique for you and like really work well. And yeah, now I'm way more okay with like starting with templates or something, because custom sites are just so much work.
Yes.
And I was getting tired of it like taking forever to complete a project. I don't know if you're like this, but I get really burnt out. Even if it's like a dream client,
Yeah.
whenever we hit like 3 months, I don't want to look at that project anymore. I'm like
Yes.
so done with it. So now I'm a little bit more open to doing projects more quickly, but I definitely think there has to be a balance where you're not just giving them something quick and cheap that isn't going to work. Like
Yeah.
I just over this past year, I've started messing around with um, whenever I send out a proposal, if the client's budget is on the lower end, I've tried presenting some options that aren't like, I haven't done like the 1 day thing. But I know there was one client who reached out to me. They needed a new website. It was a Shopify website, and it was a really cool brand. And they'd said that like they were growing really quickly, but they had a budget of $1,000. And I was like, well, I was pretty clear with her. I was like, you can't do a custom website for that much. And it's hard to even do a full website for that much. And she understood. It was just like, she was very clear with me that it wasn't that she thought that's what it should be worth. That's just really all that they had to spend. And yeah, but it was a cool client and I wanted to try and make it work if I could. And so that was my first time trying to think, okay, how could I condense my process to be less time, but still feel like I was giving them something useful? Because their site, I don't know, I could see where just making a couple of updates would, make a big difference for them. So I pitched to her doing like a 3 or 4 day
Okay.
process where the only thing that I was going to be working on is I would choose a template for us to use, and then I would do a customized design for just the homepage.
Yeah.
And that was it. And then all the rest of the site would just use the template, whatever the default design was for those pages with the template. So that's what I pitched to her, where like day one, I would create, a new design for the homepage. Day two, she would give me feedback and I'd like start making changes. Day three, I'd finish making changes and then I would upload everything to the site and like install it. Maybe I'd need day four, maybe not, but I was going to do that for $1,000. So it was like, okay, I'm spending less than a week. I get $1,000.
Yeah.
I felt like I don't feel like I'm being cheated
Yeah.
by
Yeah.
doing that because it wasn't going to take me a ton of time. She didn't end up doing it, but it was like that was my first time where I tried anything like that to condense my process. But it was still like, I don't know. I think it depends on the project and the client because I never want to feel like I'm just giving them something that's just going to be a temporary fix. I want it to be worth the money. And there have been times where clients have come to me where I could have done something like that for them, given them a really quick, simple project that would fit their budget. There was one in particular, and I almost said yes to her because she was really nice and she was really excited to work with me. But then I just felt in my gut, I was like, this is not going to be worth the money for her. Like, she's going to want to change her website again in a few months, probably. Like, this is just a temporary thing. And she should not be spending this money right now. She should spend it on something else. And so I ended up hopping on another call with her and telling her that. And she was actually really grateful. She was like, thanks for being honest. And like, I'm glad that you don't just want to do this to get a paycheck. And that's where I feel like that can get, I don't know, doing those types of like 1 day projects. That's where I don't want it to be that where I'm like, okay, let me just get another $1,000.
Totally. There's no way you can be as invested in those clients. You shouldn't be. Not when like someone else is paying you $10,000-$12,000.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, and that's where I feel like I just can't be as invested in that project. In where like exactly what you're saying, it's not worth it for them and it's not worth it for me, and I don't know. But I always go back and forth like obviously like we only have so many hours in the day, and is there a better way to make this process more efficient? And I don't know, I just feel like there is so much value in having someone who is willing to like go that deep and like transform the business in that way, because the end result is way different than if you hadn't done that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
and it's tough too, because I know that, of course, the clients I want to work with want the full package. They want to do all the branding. They want to do packaging stuff. They want a full website. But I also know that there are clients or potential clients out there who that is not what they need. And that's kind of where that value stuff comes in. It's like their budget's low because the project isn't that important to them or something, or like, it's just not really what they need right now. And that's where it's tough, is I have to accept that, like, there are clients who they really don't need, they do just need a logo,
totally.
Like there's a client that I'm working with right now where she did end up deciding to go with more of like a full branding package, but I pitched to her just a logo, and I swore I would never do that because I'm like, this goes against everything. But it's like she's at a stage where that's really all that she needs. She doesn't need everything else right now. And sometimes I have to just like accept the fact that not everybody needs all of the stuff that I want to cram into the project that I just want to do because it's fun and I love it.
Totally. But I like the fact that like you're not offering them your full package at a lower price. You're doing less at a lower price.
Yeah, I think always taking stuff out.
Exactly, because I think a lot of times we're like, oh, well, you can't afford that. Okay, I'll do it all for less. Instead, we need to think like, well, what can you do for that much? Or like, how could you do this a smaller amount of that bigger package kind of thing? I think that's like something good to know, just because I always felt like, oh, I need to just do it for less, but no, just do less for less. kind of.
Yeah. And I know that along with like doing your services, design services, you've also sold digital products and stuff. So like, how did that come about? Like, why did you decide to do that? Because I feel like you did that pretty early on, right?
Yeah. I've done it from the beginning. And I think like, obviously in the beginning you have less client work. And so you have time. And for me, I think those were really like the first personal projects I ever did, because again, they're just things that I just like created. I had an idea or I was inspired by something and I just created it. But then instead of it just living in my portfolio, I could actually sell it and make money off of it. And I remember feeling like the first like year that when someone would ask me for my portfolio, I wanted to just like send them to my template shop. Like, here's a collection of all the things I love to design. But I encourage all designers who are just starting out to go that route, because I was able to make money. I mean, I didn't have clients, but I could sell a template. And even before I ever had a huge audience, I could sell my templates to other people's audiences, like on Creative Market, or I started making templates specifically for ProPhoto, which is a WordPress platform, and ProPhoto let me sell them on their website. So I was selling them to like these people who already had built-in audiences, and I was making money like consistently every month, even when I didn't have client projects. And two, even now, I'm so grateful that I made all those when I did, because I have way less time now to make digital products like you. I mean, I know you talk about this a lot. Like, I mean, when you're working with clients, you don't have the time, and it just takes so much longer to create something that's passive. And so if you can do it before, while you do have the time, you can keep making money on those things later down the road when you don't have the time. But yeah, I think it's just a great way to like pour into a more personal type project and then actually have like a monetary return. And it's just like, I always like talk about how like the more revenue streams you have in place, the more money you're going to make. Like that is just the fact of the matter. Like if you're making 50 grand a year on client work and you also have a template shop, now you're making like just 60 grand or 70 grand. And that's just money that you left on the table, you know, if you didn't have that stuff. It's not like it's taking away from what you are already making. It's only ever adding to it. So I think like people who wonder how you get to those high numbers, like how do you make six figures? Like 6-figure business owners don't just have one revenue stream. They have multiple, and every one that they add is more. It's like all adds on top of each other. So yeah, like when you're first starting out and you have the time and you want to just create, I always say just create digital products. I think that is so smart because you have the time and you probably won't later on.
Yeah. Yeah. And I feel like a lot of designers have been talking about or like thinking about doing passive income or digital products, especially lately, because I don't know if this happened with you, but with COVID and just kind of like everything going on in the world, especially with lots of small businesses shutting down or like, you know, having their own sales go down. I know my inquiries went down for quite a while whenever COVID started. And I know it's been kind of weird because I've talked to other designers about it. And I feel like some people are like, yeah, I haven't had any inquiries. And some people are like, oh, it's been the busiest month ever. So it's been kind of like random. But yeah, I've heard a lot more people talking about, oh, should I start selling digital products? Because it is, you know, client work can be a roller coaster sometimes. And there are going to be times, especially like I know there are busier seasons than others with client work. I feel like beginning of the year and like springtime is usually whenever my client work really ticks up because it's like beginning of the year and that's when people are like, oh, I need to do this year. And then they want to invest. But yeah, like during the summer, I was planning on taking time off anyways. So it wasn't a huge hit to me, but like I didn't have any clients lined up for a month and a half or like 2 months. I just didn't have any client work. And my template shop and my course, it still brought in a ton of money. I was still making money. And even like, so I started my course and my template shop, would that be 2 years ago now? Maybe. No, last year. It's like everything feels like it's a million years ago right now. But yeah, so I started all of that in beginning of 2019, and it was like it took all of 2019 for me to really get all of that stuff set up in a way that was sustainable so that I didn't have to keep working on it all the time. But like for 2019, I'm pretty sure it might have been like, it was close to 50-50 between like income from my passive stuff and then income from client work. But my course and my template shop were like a little bit more than my client work, which like blew my mind that would happen. But yeah, and maybe that's because now I feel like my audience is mostly other designers. So it's just like a lot more effective to sell something to other designers than to attract clients.
Totally. But you essentially like doubled your revenue.
Yeah, I literally doubled my income, and like that's wild. And that's something I never thought that I would make that much money from Wayfair. And of course, that's because in my mind, I was thinking I'm only going to work with clients. I never planned to have a course or something. That just kind of like randomly happened. I wasn't expecting to do that. But yeah, there's definitely, when you're working, if you have a service-based business, there's just really a limit to how much you can do with that. And unless you want to hire a team and outsource a bunch of stuff, which then that costs more money, that's where I feel like my template shop and everything in general is just like a lot more profitable than client work. Because with client work, with client work, especially now, if I'm like, I outsource my web development now. So that meant that my website prices had to be a lot higher than they were before, because now I have to pay a developer. And then I also started having a junior designer help me this year. So that means that now I have to pay the junior designer. So now it's just like the money that I'm getting from clients, it's not all going to me anymore. It's going all these other places. So I'm not making as much money off of it. And that's where having a different revenue stream, that's been crucial for me. And like you said, I agree. I wish I had started it sooner, because whenever I started it, I did have client work consistently, and it was like I spent probably 2 months first creating my course, and I also had a bunch of clients at that time, so it was like the craziest season probably of my business, where I was just like working all the time to try and get it up. And I'm so glad that I pushed through and I got it up, because obviously it was worth it, but it would have been so much better if I had done that during a time where I didn't have a bunch of clients and I could like only focus on that. Because it's even simple digital products, or like doing a paid workshop or something, it takes work. And like you said, the point is that for it to be successful, you have to have an audience to sell it to. And you can do things like you said, where you're sort of taking someone else's audience. If yours is small, you can do stuff like that. That helps, but it's just a lot of like promoting, and that can get really exhausting.
Yes. No, I agree. I agree. And like, I'm just now starting to dive into like funnels and like ways to automate marketing and things like that. Cause you're totally right. Like it just gets exhausting to be promoting your client work and be promoting your products and be promoting your course. And yeah, it is a lot. Sorry, my dog is being annoying.
It's okay.
Oh, we're having an interview.
It's okay, because my dog, I think luckily she's sleeping right now, but I was really worried that she would be doing something like that too.
Yeah, all that to say, I'm a huge fan of digital products, passive revenue, and I think it's like a huge opportunity as a designer, because I get super burnt out too. I mean, sorry, like, I mean, at the end of a client project, I am just exhausted. And the thought of being able to like take time off and work with less clients is so appealing to me. If I can have something like just running in the background, paying the bills, and so much more scalable. I mean, I could sell 1 million of this one product I made. I can only work with one client, and when I'm done, that's all the money I'll ever be able to make on that. So yeah, I think it's a really smart route to go. Not even as your sole income stream, but just as another revenue stream.
Yeah, absolutely. And then switching gears, because I wanted to talk about this too. So something that we have in common is that we've both lived abroad and like done traveling and stuff while having our business. So tell me about that, because you guys, we talked about this a little bit before we started recording, but you guys traveled all over the place. And so I just wanted to know, I know because your business was like early stages at that point, right? So what was that like, trying to work some while also traveling, and what was all of that like?
Yeah, it was intense, honestly. And I think it was doable because I was at the early stages. So we would kind of get in this rhythm of like, we would like visit a bunch of countries in a short period of time, like 5 countries in 2 weeks or whatever. And then we would land somewhere for like a longer period of time. Just like financially for us, we needed to like, because when you're traveling around and like staying in hotels and things like that, it gets expensive. But if we could stay in like an Airbnb long term, it was a lot more affordable. So that allowed us to like keep going kind of thing. And so I tried to schedule projects for those like more long-term times. So when we were traveling around, I was doing a lot less work. And then when we were stopped somewhere for a few months, that's when I was like doing the bulk of my client work. And Panda. Sorry. But I remember feeling like, oh, I can't wait to get back home and just like get to do this all the time. Like, because
Mhm.
it was hard, because I wanted to like be totally experiencing all the things we were getting to do. And it was hard sometimes to feel like, oh, I need to just actually sit in the hotel room all day and like knock out a site design or something. But it did allow us to travel. I mean, like, if I hadn't been working, we wouldn't have gotten to do nearly all the things that we did. We
Mhm.
saved, we saved enough to live for a year, but it would have been like living on like a shoestring budget, you know.
Mhm.
And because I was working, we got to like do things. We got to like have experiences and like go see more places and stay somewhere like a little nicer, or like eat out more and things like that. And I think
Mhm.
it made the trip as a whole so much more amazing. And so it was obviously worth it. Like, I was willing to do that. But yeah, I don't think at this point I could do it again. Like, as busy as I am now, it wouldn't be possible. Um, but that's not to say it's like that. It's another reason why I love passive revenue, is because I feel like my business could get to a place where I take on a client project and then that project ends and I take a few months off to travel, because I still love to travel. I mean, both
Mhm.
my husband and I, that's like something that we see as like a priority in our life. And I think passive revenue allows you to do that. I mean, like you just said, you took a month and a half off and it was fine because
Mhm.
you still made money. So I think just, again, having like passive revenue gives you so much freedom over your time and your schedule. Because I hope to like continue to do that again. And we are so like blessed in the fact that we're digital. I think like when COVID hit, I felt so grateful to have a business that I could like run from anywhere.
Mhm.
And that's still true. Like, if I wanted to go live in wherever, I still could take my business with me and it would be fine. Um, but yeah, your time is split between, I guess, like experiencing the countries and then also like being a business owner and working and
Mhm.
doing what you need to do for your clients. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, no, I totally get it. And for us, like we're living in a place like 9, 10 months at a time. So it's definitely not, it does feel more like real life. Like if we were traveling more often, um, I don't know how I would do it, because and it took me a while to even figure out how to handle moving
yes,
abroad and like how much time should I take off? Should I even take time off while we're moving? Because like the first couple times that we moved, I know one time in particular, we had been in Denmark and I had to go home early, because usually we go back to the US for the summer during my
yeah,
husband's off season. And so I had to go home a little bit early. So I was flying by myself. But at that same time, at that point, I had I guess you would call it a retainer, but I had like a consistent job where I worked for this magazine. And I loved that job because it was so fun to design a magazine. That was like a dream
yeah,
of mine, to work with a magazine. But it was also a crazy job because stuff like that, just the expectations of like everything's really fast paced, like really tight deadlines, because you're working with, you know, the editor, the writer, the photographer, and like everyone is just like rushing to get stuff done at all times. So the magazine, it was like going to print right like the same week that
oh
I
my,
had to fly home. And it was a complete nightmare. And it's like, I was just naive because I wasn't even a year into running my business yet, I don't think. So I was
yeah,
really naive, and like I should have told my boss for that job, I should have said like, I can't be expected to be working on this while I'm traveling. Like
yeah,
I
totally.
need at least 3 days off, you know?
Yeah,
Um, I should have said that to her. But I was a people pleaser, and I was like, no, it's fine. Like, I can work on stuff. Like, I'll be sitting in the airport. I'll have tons of time. It's not a big deal. And I did that not only with that, but I would do that with some like other clients. Other times that we had moved, I made it seem like us moving wasn't a big deal. I was like, oh, like we've done it before. It's not even stressful to us anymore. But it was. Every time
Yeah,
it was. And like
totally.
we oh my gosh, it was just like the worst night of my life. And it was like I flew from Copenhagen to Finland, and then I was flying to New York, then down to DC, and then my parents were picking me up in DC. And whenever I got to New York, there was a really big storm and all the flights were canceled. And so I was by myself. I had tons of luggage because we just spent like 10 months in
Yeah.
Denmark. And yeah, my flight was canceled. I couldn't get a hotel or anything, and I was just like stuck there. And it essentially, my parents ended up just driving the rest of the way up to New York to get me because it just
My
didn't seem like I had any options to like get a different flight. But then it was like it was going to take them another like 4 hours to come get me. So what am I doing? I was sitting on the floor of JFK and had my laptop out, and I was making magazine edits after
yes,
midnight
yes,
because I had to get them done. And it was like, this is crazy. Why am I doing this? And so
yeah,
that's one of the things that I think I've learned the most about. I guess I have a nomadic business, but to me, it's not, because we are just like living in another
yeah.
country. We aren't really traveling like other nomads do, but it's still like traveling like that takes so much out of
Oh
you.
my
It
gosh.
doesn't matter how far you're going or something, but like, oh, just the logistics of traveling, it's so much like mental and physical effort.
Yes,
And
yes,
yeah, so now, and it's always tough for us because whenever we move, um, we don't have a lot of control. And I'm sure with you guys, like you had like planned out, when you're going places. For us, because my husband's team, uh, I guess for anyone listening, my husband plays basketball, if you didn't know, and that kind of explains the weirdness of our life. Um, but his team, they book our flights for us. So we don't have any control
wow,
over that. Yeah. And usually, I mean, depends on where you are and how good the team is.
right,
Sometimes they'll like give you a choice, like, do you want to fly this day? And you'll say yes, and then it's fine. But sometimes there have been times where we don't really have a choice about when we fly or anything, and it's
right,
very short notice because usually the end of the season they play in the playoffs. And once they lose, then the season's done, and then they book our flight to go home, and they might book our flight a couple weeks after that, or they might book our flight a couple of days after that. You just like never know. So for me, I've had to figure out how to manage that with clients, because
totally.
usually, and now I have an idea of like the time in the year when we will be moving, but it's usually like a pretty big range of like we might move between this day and this day, and there's like a full month in between, um
That's crazy. I
yeah,
mean, yeah, that's so much to have to just like, I mean, I see how you're like, I just need to take a month and a half off because
yeah,
I don't know. I
yeah.
mean,
And
yeah,
that
that's a
that's
lot.
that's really why this past summer I had to do that. But I was planning on taking time off anyways, because um whenever we go home for the summer, like that's the only time we see our family and our friends throughout the whole year. The rest of the
Yeah.
time we're in a foreign country where we don't know anyone. So like that's important for me now, that like I don't really want to be working on stuff while we're
Yeah.
home. I just want to be home and enjoy it while I can. And so then with COVID, that kind of messed everything up. Like I had scheduled my projects the beginning of this year that I knew the last one was going to end. And then I just wasn't scheduling anything new because I knew we would go home like in like late May, early June. Um, But then COVID hit, and then they banned people from traveling. All the flights were canceled. And so then we were like, oh no, are we even going to be able to go home or not? Like, we had no idea. And it wasn't until like beginning of June that we found out that they were going to allow people to fly between Portugal and the US again. So then we talked with the team. They were like, yep, you can go home. You just have to be back within 3 weeks or something. And so we booked our flight. Like, as soon as the flights were made available, they booked our flight for us and we went home. But that's where, and whenever, I think the day that we were flying back, Europe announced that they were closing the borders and they weren't going to allow people to come back in. So then again, it was like we got to the US and we were like, we have no idea if we're even going to be able to go back to Portugal. So that's where it was like, I'm so glad that I had planned ahead to take that time off. And I was just like, and even like leading up to that, whenever we were unsure if they were even going to allow people to fly at all, I was like, okay, well, looks like we're not going to go home, so I should just start booking clients. But I kept telling myself, like, nope, you never know what's going to happen. You're going to be grateful. Just keep your schedule open. And that's where it was like, it was so hard for me to do that, because you feel like I'm sitting here with nothing to do. I need to have client work. But yeah, I'm so glad that I just left my schedule open and didn't book anything, because I don't know what I would have. That whole process of traveling during COVID was extra crazy, and I don't know what I would have done if I'd had a client.
Yeah, no, I know. Like, I feel like there's this like glamorized idea of like working in an airport and like jet setting and like, but traveling is actually the worst. I mean, like, especially going from country to country, like, you're tired, the flight might suck, like, airport might suck. That's the thing too, is like, not all airports are nice. Not all airports have outlets and like places to sit. I've been to so many airports where you can't even get into the terminal until 45 minutes before your flight, and sometimes they don't even tell you what gate you're at, you know, like, so you're just like walking around because that's all you can do. We had a flight into London, and like it was like an 8-hour layover, and we couldn't get into our gate until 45 minutes before. And we literally, there was nowhere to sit. Like, we just had to wander around with all our stuff. And like, I feel like a lot of people don't realize, like, travel days, there's no, I mean, yeah, I like learned early on that there was no way I would be able to get anything done. It's not like you have just 8 hours of time to kill. It's just like, there's so much more that goes into traveling like that. So I totally know what you're saying, and I totally agree. And it's so great, I think, to be able to own a business though, and know that that's coming, and like have the flexibility to schedule for that kind of thing. Yeah.
I'm very lucky, because especially with my husband's job, I mean, the whole reason I started my business is so that I could travel with him. I knew he wanted to play professional basketball. I wanted to go with him. And this is like the only way that we were going to be able to make that work and have me still be able to do what I wanted to do. But I'm very lucky, because there are lots of basketball wives who have to find something else that they didn't, originally intend on doing, or some of them just stay home and they live separated from their husband for most of the year. So yeah, very lucky that I can make it work, and very lucky that my clients, like, they get it. I think, like I said, with that situation, I just was naive, and I felt like I wasn't in a position where I could say, hey, I can't work right now. But now I'm like I said, I kind of tell my clients, if I'm scheduling a project during a time that I think we could move, I'm just really upfront with them and just kind of say, like, hey, we might be moving within this month, and I can't really tell you what date it would be. Like, we might find out a couple weeks ahead of time. We might find out a couple days ahead of time. We just never really know. But I'm like, I will, of course, keep you updated. And usually I just, if I'm like planning out that project timeline, I just automatically add in an extra week to the
Yeah.
timeline, no
Yeah.
matter what, so that I'm not the launch date that I give them is still probably going to be accurate,
Yeah.
just in case, and every single time they've been understanding, like they get
Yeah.
it. They're like, that's crazy. I'm so sorry you have to go through that. Take as much time as you need. So yeah, but it's just, yeah, I think the nomad life is very Instagram worthy. And of course, it's amazing and like so fun and so worth it, but it's definitely not all fun.
No. There's a lot of times where you're just like really sweaty and really tired and like running through an airport, and all you want is like to be in a bed.
Yeah. And you do definitely, like, there are points, even now with our life, there are points where I'm like, oh man, what would it be like to just have a place to live all the time?
Yeah, totally. And I don't know if you feel this way, but like I felt a really new appreciation for the United States, because I think just like regardless of like where you are in the world, like where you grew up is home. I mean, like the United States is home, and there's something to be said for like just being home, and like everyone around you knowing like what it's like to live there, and just like how freaking convenient everything is. Like I mean, I just miss small things like Amazon Prime and just like all the stuff where I was like, even too, just like, I think the US maybe gets like bad rap a lot of times, especially now, but like we are a really like culturally diverse country, like when I'm living in Greece, I can't find Mexican food anywhere, like I can't, whereas like just everything is at our fingertips here. And I think a lot of people who haven't traveled don't realize that. And I don't know, it's like it sometimes takes like leaving even long term to like feel or like realize what you took for granted living in the US. Even just like learning how to speak English, like I have never felt so grateful to have been taught English, because like Europe is so great, but like a lot of other countries, knowing how to speak English is such a gift, and like people work so hard to learn that skill, and because it so much greatly furthers their like quality of life. But yeah, like when we were in Thailand, we were renting an Airbnb from like a local Thai person, and he was just like, wow, you guys are from the United States. Oh my gosh. Like his mind was blown, because probably traveling to the US is something he never even fathoms like possible for him. And like learning English, he did that on his own, like he had to go the extra mile and like do that on his own. And yeah, you just like the small things that you never even think about. I think being a US citizen, you start to realize, wow, like there are things about the US that are special, and like that no other country is set up that way. And like you just have this new appreciation, I think, for home, I guess. I don't know if you feel that way, but
yeah, you definitely feel very like you've been pretty like privileged to live in a place where there's just a lot of stuff. And of course, there are lots of people who live in the US who don't have don't have a lot of opportunities too. But yeah, it's been interesting living abroad, especially for us. Like this is now our 4th year that we've lived. We did spend 1 year where we lived in the US for the full season, but yeah, we've lived in quite a few places, and it has been really interesting. It's funny because now whenever we go home, because we're from West Virginia, which is a very rural country, like no cities type of place. So now whenever we go home, of course, it's like that's our home still. And I think even after we're done traveling, we plan on coming back to the US permanently. Like we don't plan, I don't think, on living permanently in a different country. But I don't know, it's just interesting. Sometimes coming home, of course, we like there's so many things that we appreciate more, especially I think after we lived in France, which lots of people talk about how the French are like rude, especially to Americans, which we didn't really experience that. We lived in a smaller town where they weren't used to tourists, so that was kind of weird. But whenever we went to Paris, it definitely felt, but I thought it was more, it wasn't that like French people are rude, but it's like they're annoyed with tourists. And I
Yeah,
assume people in New York City are the same, you know?
totally, yeah.
But anyways, one thing that we noticed with being in Europe is that if we're like in the grocery store and you like bump into someone, Americans, or at least I'm sort of from the South, you
Yeah.
say sorry like to people. We say sorry all the time. And I think it was first in Denmark, actually. One of my husband's Danish teammates pointed out, and he's like, you guys say sorry for
Oh my
everything. And we had never like thought about that as being weird because it's just so expected in the
yeah.
US. And but it's like I remember, yeah, in like Denmark and in France, it's like I'd be in the grocery store and old ladies would like bump their cart into me and they just don't say anything and just keep walking. And I'm like, it comes off as rude, but our Danish friend, he was like, why would you say sorry? Obviously you didn't mean to do that. So why would you even
Right.
say sorry about it? And we're like, okay, I guess that makes sense. But then after
Yeah.
we left France and we came back to the US for the summer, I went into Walmart, which one, an it's like an amazing experience to walk into Walmart after you've been living abroad. It's just like you don't even realize how enormous Walmart is and how much stuff they have. It's crazy that
All
that
in
even
one place.
yes, it's crazy that that even exists because there are big stores in other countries obviously, but I feel like I've not seen anything at the
Same.
level of Walmart. But
No.
anyways, I'm getting like really off topic, um but I went into Walmart with my family. Like, I think we might have, like, they had just picked me up from the airport and we went straight to Walmart to get something. And I just walked in, I was like, oh my gosh, this is crazy. And I was walking down an aisle and there were people, walking the other way. And Walmart's aisles are like really wide, you know? So, like, we're walking past, like, walking towards each other, but they were not even close to like being in my way, like they're in their own lane essentially. But as we got closer, they said sorry to me, but they weren't even in my way. And I was like, oh my gosh. It was just like one of those things where I hadn't heard someone say sorry in the
Yeah.
grocery store for like 10 months. And it was like they said that to me. I was like, I'm home. Like
I
this
know.
is
I'm
it was
sorry too.
yeah, it was like an emotional thing because I remember I went and grabbed my mom. I was like, they just said sorry to me, and they didn't even bump into me. They didn't have to say it, but they said it. It was just one of those things where it's like, man, that's something that I never appreciated before. Um,
Totally.
yeah, but it's
Totally.
also I feel like we also feel like it's also helped us notice things about the U.S. that are weird too, that like we
Yeah.
grew up like things that we were used to growing up, especially growing up in a place like West Virginia where it's very rural and not very much diversity at all.
Yeah.
Yeah, just like stuff that we've noticed about traditions or just stuff that we never thought was strange or like questioned why is it that way. And then us being overseas, it's like obviously opened our eyes to a lot of stuff
Yeah.
too, that we're like,
Oh
wait a
yeah.
second, why do we do things that way? um
Totally. Oh
yeah.
yeah. It's like it's the beauty in traveling and like getting out of your country and your bubble is just like, oh wow, an entire world is operating at the same time we are, like
Mm-hmm.
everyone's living their life. And I think that's the other thing too. I thought like here we are in this country and like everyone's just living their life. Like they're going
Mm-hmm.
to work and they're going to the grocery store and they're cooking for their family, and like there's this whole other world happening at the same time that ours is.
Mm-hmm.
And you just like don't even think about it, I
Mm-hmm.
think, with
I
if you
think it's I
yeah.
think it's made me realize that like what I would consider like normal as far as like what's a normal life, or like normal things that you do, or normal things that you believe. It's like there are so many versions of
Yes.
normal. Like
Yeah.
it's that's where, yeah, that's what I mean, where it's like things that me growing up in West Virginia, I thought like this is the way, this is obviously the right way that you do something. And then we go live in France and people do something differently and we're like, well, that's so weird, why would they do it that way? But then as we live, since we're lucky enough to get to live in our wherever we live for like 10 months,
Yeah.
we really get to understand what it's like to be there all the time and like get
Totally.
used to the routines and everything. And that's where we're like, oh, well, duh, that makes sense why they do it that way. Of course they
Totally.
would do it that way. And
Was it
yeah.
you that posted on Instagram a meme like today about like the vacation time? Like when a European's on vacation, they're like, I'll be back in September, and a US person's like in the ER and they're like, I might be 30 minutes later responding. I was like, that is so accurate. Like we spent about 3 months in Sweden, and they get, first off, they get 2 years of maternity leave, and then they also get 8 weeks of vacation during the year. And like it just, I mean, that's the way it should be done. You
Mm-hmm.
know.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah. It's
completely.
crazy some of the stuff that you like learn. Yeah. We've with my husband being here in Portugal, because my husband got injured this year, so we had to deal with lots of like the healthcare stuff with going to the hospital, going to the doctor. That's been really interesting for us to learn. I mean, we were in other places that had similar healthcare systems and stuff, but that's been really interesting, and for us to like talk with our parents about what it's like and like how things work and how different it is from the US. That was one of the reasons why we chose to, or why we went home to the US this summer, because they lifted the restrictions, but then they said, oh, you have to be back within 3 weeks, because my husband needed another x-ray. And the person from the team was like, you could get the x-ray in the US, but I don't know if you want to pay for it. He was like,
Yeah,
nope,
yeah,
I don't want to pay for it. He's like, I
totally.
will do it for free in Portugal. um,
Yes.
yeah, lots
Yeah,
of
no.
crazy stuff that you just realize is like so different in other parts of the world. And it just makes you question a lot.
Oh yeah, you think like, oh, I mean, even just seeing the way other countries' governments are run, or like things like
Mm-hmm.
that, it's just, yeah, it's just so much more to think about and consider, and like, I don't know. Yeah, it's so true. You like learn so much, and at the same time, you have like a whole new appreciation for where you came from.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. Okay, so final question. We've been talking for so long, but that's okay because it's been so good. Final question is, what's one piece of advice that you would give to young business owners or creatives or freelancers, whoever?
Yeah. Oh my gosh, this is such a hard
I
question.
know.
I saw that you were gonna ask me this, and I was like, I don't know what I'm gonna say. I think like ultimately, I would tell them to like go for it, like make it possible, because it is possible. And as like far out of reach as it seems, it will happen. Like you will get there. And I think like it's easy to look at other people who are already doing it and feel like there's no way I could ever be like them, but you can. Like
Mm-hmm.
it's literally a matter of you deciding and doing it. And that's all it takes. Like you want to leave your job, you can leave your job. You want to work for yourself, you can work for yourself. Like no one is stopping you, and it is 100% possible. Like I said, like you have complete ability to build the life that you dream of and that you want. And like even financially, like there is no cap to how much money you can make when you work for yourself. Like that's been mind-blowing for me to feel like, oh, if I was working for someone else, maybe I would get like a small raise every few years. But like when I work for myself, I can double what I'm making year on year. Like what other job can you do that? And not like the first year I made hardly anything, but if I had stopped then because I made hardly anything, I wouldn't like 3 years later be where I am now, you know? And so I think just like believe in yourself. I guess it's so cheesy, but like believe in yourself and believe that it's possible for your life. As it is. I mean, it like genuinely is. And even like someone who is now doing something that I didn't go to school for, that I had zero experience in, and now like have found some success in, like it's absolutely possible. Whatever it is that you want to do, I think would be ultimately what I would want to say probably.
Yeah, no, I love that. And for sure, I feel like that's such like universal advice that
Yeah.
can apply to anyone, no matter what you're trying to do with your career. Yeah, it's definitely mindset stuff is typically the root of a lot of problems that people face. And I totally relate, because I feel like it wasn't until like 3 years in that I actually started believing that I could do anything with this. So yeah, I get it for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. No. Yeah, this has been so great. Again, it's just like so fun to chat and meet you. And like I know we've gone back and forth on social media in the past, but yeah, you've always been someone that I've like admired and followed, especially because you're living abroad. And yeah, it's just been fun. It's been fun to get to like share experiences and just get to know you. And so yeah, thank you so much for asking me to do this interview.
Yeah, no, thank you so much. And yeah, I mean, I feel like I first started following you while you were traveling too, because
Yeah.
that's like I was interested in like seeing other people who were doing it and figuring out how the heck they were doing it too. Um, but yeah, and I feel like that it is funny because I have been following you for so long, and to just see like how much you've grown and like how much your business has changed over the years. So yeah, it's
Yeah.
been awesome. I'm so glad that you were willing to talk. So
Yes. Yes, of course.